They're like old friends that come and punch you in the face, you know?
Repeatedly. I feel the fear in a weird way that some Cassidy is gonna flashbang me and shot me.
Don't worry, you're safe in here.
Today I'm joined by a man who really needs no introduction because I'm sure as soon as he opens his mouth you will recognize him from something.
Maybe. So, hopefully something good.
Whether it be Critical Role, Persona, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you've been in a lot of stuff. It's an honor to have you here, Matthew Mercer.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to hang and chat for a bit.
Yeah, so we're gonna be talking about your gaming journey. Let's go right back to the very beginning. What was the process like in convincing your parents to get you gaming in the house?
My grandma had one. She had an Atari, and I would play whenever we'd go and visit her in Georgia, and I was very young at the time. I wasn't necessarily good at it, but I knew there's something there, and by the time I was old enough my parents could kind of afford something was around the time the NES came out. So that was really my first console that I owned, but the Atari 2600 was the first one that I actually played. And then the Super Nintendo was coming out, and I remember being excited about that, but around the same time the Sega Genesis was hitting. And I was right at that age, that turning point in my youth where it was like, the Super Nintendo was cool, but the Genesis had attitude. And so when it came to the point of like asking for what I wanted for Christmas, when my parents could afford it, I was like, I wanna go with the Genesis. And so I was like, all right, let's get some Sonic the Hedgehog, let's get some Toe Jam and Earl, was a big game in our household. My parents still play it to this day, and I loved it. I dove into these games for the system at the time, but as the years went on, I kept being jealous of friends with the Super Nintendo because so many good games were coming out on that as well. I discovered with the NES that I loved RPGs through like Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy, and so the Super Nintendo, I eventually, after years of going over to friends' houses to play it, I got one kind of later in its life cycle and then went back and played all the games that I missed out on.
What kind of genre of gamer are you? Do you typically gravitate towards RPGs or platformers? Is there a specific genre, or are you kind of just, you play everything?
I play everything to a degree. I will say as the years have gone on, I'm looking for atmosphere and story more than anything, so RPGs tend to be the biggest draw. Plus I've been playing them my whole life, and genre work tends to be really intriguing to me if it's done well. But I've also, as the years have gone on, really enjoy really atmospheric and immersive kind of action exploration games. I'm a very big Soulsborne player, like From Software, I've been with them since the Kingsfield series.
How do you approach Souls games? Are you a kind of person who will just not look at any guides and just try and figure it out yourself, or are you like me and after, 5 hours of head against the brick wall, I will go on YouTube?
I go through the first playthrough on my own, and then I go through on a New Game Plus sort of like playthrough using a guide to pick up everything that I missed.
Yeah.
Like I want my first playthrough to be stumbly and lost and
as
immersive.
Miyazaki intended.
Exactly. I want to wander into yet the fourth poison swamp and be like, oh, this again, sure, let's go. Oh, it's another big-eyed basilisk killing me instantly, cool.
Let's talk about your journey from role-playing as a kid, playing video games, into QA, into where you are now. So how did that journey go for you?
Going through my high school years, I was planning a career in animation. I wanted to become an artist. I spent most of my life going through studio art classes and building up my portfolio for like 2D and 3D animation, planning for CalArts and to try and really make that a career. And two things stopped me from doing that. One, I began to talk with people who were animators, and they were very honest about the career.
How tough it is.
How tough it is, and how what is it about art that you love? And I'm like, I love to create and draw. Like, you don't get to create a lot of things in animation. You just get to draw a lot of other people's designs, which is cool in its own right, but you have to be wanting that facet of it. And couldn't really afford college, so it would have been like a whole bunch of debt to heap onto my parents at a time where it would have been kind of rough. So I was like, I'm not gonna go to college right now. Means you need a job. And a friend of mine had gotten a job testing video games, and I was like, that is the greatest career that could ever happen.
Yeah.
How did I just play video games all day and get paid for it?
Don't have to go outside.
That's great. $10 an hour? Yeah, let's go. But, and then I was so excited. I got my job testing such wonderful titles as the PlayStation's Land Before Time and Great Valley Racing Adventure, Casper Friends Around the World for the PS2, since that was just coming out. Berenstain Bears Extreme Sports on the Game Boy Color.
Who knew those bears loved an extreme sport?
I didn't either, but I spent a lot of time getting them through them. I learned patience. I learned meditation. I learned self-care. I learned a lot of lessons through that period of time. I spent so much time in those games.
Yeah.
Like, while it can be kind of soul-numbing to play the same game, especially if it's not a particularly great game, for long periods of time, you find community amongst your other players, and we made a lot of friends in that space, and I worked my way up into a management position within that company, then eventually got headhunted by Sony to then jump over to Sony Santa Monica studio, where I worked on the tail end of God of War 1 for its localizations, and then worked at the beginning of God of War 2.
Gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
And then I got headhunted from there to work for Infinity Ward when they were finishing the second Call of Duty, and then was the QA manager for the first Modern Warfare game.
Wow.
That was my last job in the industry before I jumped over to voiceover full-time. But met a lot of great friends there. Was a very wild experience.
So I mean, you had obviously this great experience in working in games already, understanding the process of how games are made. How did you then make the jump to voice work?
Long story short, my dad was an audio engineer, and one of their clients would dubbed anime in like the late 90s, early 2000s. My dad did a couple of bit parts in the background of some anime, like, Soldier Number 3 going, "Hey you!" And I was like, that's the coolest thing. And I was a big weeb then, just as I kind of am now. And he was like, why don't you come to one of these sessions? And I was like, I'd love to. And so I got to watch them record, and I talked to the director at the break, and he was like, I kind of like the sound of your voice. Why don't you come in here and earn $50 and do some background voices? And I was like, oh, are you sure, sir? That'd be great. It wasn't a career, but it was like, I'd do a gig every 6 to 12 months, and it was enough to be like, oh, this is exciting. I'm part of all the nerd stuff that I love being a part of. And I've kind of began to build a little bit, and I was getting enough work with larger roles through this company that I, in the back of my head, was like, well, if I ever really wanted to pursue this, I got to put a little more effort into it and have the time. And it was around the time that I was kind of done with my experience on game development and QA and stuff that I was like, well, let me go ahead and try this. And if it doesn't work out, that's fine, I can move on to the next endeavor. But let me give it make sure you give voiceover its full attention and effort for a period of time. And that way, if it works, great. If it doesn't, I can not look back and regret I've never tried.
Yeah.
Now I'm here, which is crazy. I don't get it, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm very glad you're here. I think a lot of people will be very glad you're here because you are like so prolific. It's wild because I'm a very big Overwatch player, and so when I hear you speak, it's like I feel the fear in a weird way that some Cassidy is gonna flashbang me that shot me from over the
Don't worry, you're safe in here.
But I mean,
No, that sake's not half bad. But I prefer a little bite to my liquor.
of all your roles, I really wanted to talk about being in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, particularly because you mentioned that Final Fantasy VII was such an important game for you, and there is obviously that great clip of you finding out what the role's going to be. Can you talk a little bit about going from this love of this game to being a part of its remake, its Rebirth?
It's my favorite moment in my career because of what it means to me. I think someone asked me recently, like, what's your dream role? And I was like, I got it. I don't know what to do now. I'm just kind of lost in the world, I guess, at this point. So many games have influenced me growing up, but Final Fantasy VII came out at like the freshman year of high school, just learning and discovering who I wanted to be as a person, kind of that emerging from my larval shell kind of stage of human development. So like it was so profound in its impact on me and my love of storytelling, of genre crossing, because it was very much one of the first games to really mix kind of like high fantasy with a hint of like pseudo sci-fi, cyberpunk, in a very evocative, like cinematic way. And I just fell in love with the characters. It was also the early time of the internet, so it was like finding forum boards online and chat rooms to like role play as characters from the world, or to debate questions about the world's story and the mysteries that were still out there. People scanning Ultimania books and revealing behind the scenes narrative stuff to the American audience, going, whoa, that's crazy. Like it had such an effect on me that in the early 2000s I started going to anime conventions and meeting new friends, and my community broadened even further. I got into cosplay heavily and cosplayed as characters from Final Fantasy VII. Like it was such an important part of my life. My career was just kind of starting off when they announced the remake for the PS2 back then. It was like soft announced. In my head I was like, I would love to be a part of that. And I remember having dreams of auditioning for that back then, and then it just never happened. And then the PS3 tech demo drop hit, and it was like, oh my God, they are doing it! And then it didn't happen. And it was just kind of this this ethereal hope that if it ever came around, an opportunity would arise. And then they announced the actual remake and the English cast for it. And I realized at that moment that I never received any auditions for the first game, and it was like heartbreaking. I was like, no, this is the one. This is the one that I wanted. But I did get to do some background voices on it, and I remember expressing very passionately to the people who were handling the production, like, if auditions are going out for the future games, specifically characters like Vincent Valentine, I would love to have the opportunity to audition. And I waited and waited, and the audition came through, and I was so excited, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna put everything into this. And I sent it out, and usually with video games, you hear within a month or two, standard, sometimes delayed. But usually after a month or two, if you don't hear anything, you kind of let it go and move on. And I didn't hear anything. And I was like, it was the one that got away. Like I for months after that would lament like quietly in my car while driving that it never happened. And I was like genuinely kind of sad and processing that. And then they tricked me in the booth by bringing me in for background voices and then surprising me.
That's weird. Doing something weird here. Hold on.
What the hell is this?
It was a very surreal moment that I will never ever forget.
No. Are you f***ing serious?
What is it like when you are the voice of a character who has already been like well known? So I mean, Goro Majima, for example, originally done by Mark Hamill, even though he doesn't remember doing it.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh.
I know.
I love that story.
I know.
He doesn't remember doing it.
Mark's doing plenty and has done enough in his life where he doesn't have to worry about that.
Also, Yakuza then is not where. Yeah. Yakuza now.
True.
Or Like a Dragon now. What is it like when you are, I mean, obviously it's Deep Bloom, but you are, taking a voice and then making it your own, but also paying homage? How difficult is that to you to do as an actor?
It's challenging for a couple of reasons. One, you want to make sure that you're not just copying what came before, because then it becomes kind of a pale imitation. It'll never be quite as good as the original. No matter how hard you try, you can get close, but now as opposed to being genuine and in the moment for the performance that's honest to you, you're trying to layer on top of that what you imagine their performance would have been, and sometimes it'll hit, sometimes it won't. It's a big challenge. So it's trying to respect and take what previously existed and resonated with you as a performer from what they brought to the character, and mixing that with what feels honest to you and what is unique to you as a performer, and kind of finding that middle ground to create something that is unique but still relatable and familiar to people that already understood the character in previous iterations. And that process is a very collaborative one, usually with the production team and the director, and in the essence of Final Fantasy. I wasn't given much direction, probably because I spent my whole life preparing for this and was like, I got this.
Don't worry about it.
They didn't give me any real notes, and I was like, cool, I got it. For Yakuza as well, like going in for the first session for Goro Majima, it was very much like don't do Hamill, do what's right for you. And it was like, okay. And so I more based my performance on the Japanese performer. I love Goro Majima so much in that series, and what he's brought to the character is incredible. So for me, it's trying to also pay homage to what the Japanese performer does, while also still making it my own a little bit. But yeah, so it was trying to create something new in that space that kind of touches on what came before, but also create something for the future that is new. And that's kind of the process for me, at least. I know it's different for different performers, but that's where I try and approach it.
I don't know about you guys, but I could use a little excitement.
So all these games, including Final Fantasy VII, led you to this love of storytelling, which also now is another part of your job, your life, is tabletop and Critical Role. And how did you get there?
I think it was through games like even just the first Final Fantasy, where I was first introduced to so many mythological creatures that I hadn't been exposed to. A lot of the creatures in the first Final Fantasy were pulled from the monster manual, like directly. So growing up, I loved creatures and monsters and beasts. That was something that I really kind of immersed myself in. A lot of my early artwork up into my later art was about designing creatures and demons. And yeah, so that love of monsters led to getting into like cryptozoology and mythological beasts. And I remember as a kid getting all the Time Life, like Blackbound, like Mysteries of the Unknown books. And like, I loved the paranormal, and I loved those sort of strange mysteries and designing them. And so my mom found a monster manual from the 2nd edition D&D at a garage sale and was like, this is perfect for Matt, and gave it to me. And I was like, this is so cool. I read all the lore about the monsters and like drew them in my sketchbooks. And then I learned more about what D&D was. I'd heard about it, but had nobody to play with. So I just kind of read the books on their own. And then I got into it it in high school through an invitation to a group, and it kind of absorbed me. It was a whole new thing I didn't know I could do. So that led me into acting and kind of really triggered my whole future as a voice actor. But I never thought it would be something that would be part of my career. And as the years went on, I found a group of other voice actors through a series of funny circumstances, ran a game for them, and they loved it so much it turned into a campaign for their characters, which are now known as Vox Machina. And a few years into that, we had an opportunity to stream it. And we thought nobody will ever watch this because it's 3-4 hours plus of people just rolling dice and being doofuses.
You sheep-shifted?
And we were very wrong. And now we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary of what is now a company that we all run together and have wonderful people we work with. And we have 2 animated series that are in development, and 3rd season of Vox Machina just came out.
They got some plush chairs in this.
I'm still processing.
No, I was gonna say, and like, you know, D&D's certainly had this huge resurgence, of which Critical Role has played a huge part. What's it like, people coming up to you now and saying, oh, well, I never had the confidence to run a campaign until I watched? Or, you know, what's that like? Like helping people tell their own stories?
It's the most exciting thing about it. These experiences of being empowered to create and build and then gift these experiences to people you care about, and together collaboratively building adventures and victorious moments and living through a different person, and through that discovering the kind of person you want to be. It's such a formative experience outside of just being a game. It's hard to describe how impactful it can be for somebody who really needs that, like it was for me. And so the fact that it's been through us and through other incredible creators introduced to them, and has helped them find community, helped them find confidence in themselves, and them find an outlet for their creativity that has given them a more solid place in this world, like it did for me, is special in a way that I can't describe. And every single time a person tells me that, whether it be at a convention or an event, or even just passing the street, it now happens, which is wild, to me is the greatest accomplishment I could ever hope for, I think. Amongst all the voiceover stuff I'm so proud of, I love people can enjoy the media that I'm part of, but to introduce people to something that empowers them to create something whole cloth that is so important to them, is truly something very special, and something I'm extremely proud of.
Matt,
Yes.
you have one of the most powerful IMDb pages I've ever seen. You voiced many iconic characters. I want to put it to you, as someone who also does a lot of improv,
Oh boy.
how would some of your most iconic characters react to specific situations?
Okay. Oh boy, okay.
What would happen if Goro Majima fell for a crypto scam?
You kidding me? I've been putting years and years in it. Now you know what? I'm gonna find that bastard over in India. I'm gonna go hunt him down, and I'm gonna show him what Goro Majima's all about. Yeah, I think he's gonna.
I think you
Take a
did.
flight.
The eyes too.
Yes.
Yusuke Kitawaga breaks off a situationship.
Well, first he'd probably be finishing the meal that they paid for rapidly. Sorry. Anyway, I just wanted to say that this has been a grand time getting to know each other, and I'm appreciative of the companionship you've allowed me during this very hard last semester. But I have a lot of work I have to get done in my new painting, and there's only enough room for one focus in my life. And, bye. And then he would leave immediately awkwardly. I think that's about right.
Vincent Valentine gets stuck in a lift with a stranger.
You have to press the button. It's not moving. Well, no matter how long we're stuck here, I think I can shoulder it.
Ganondorf is pulled over for speeding.
I don't need license and registration. These lands belong to me. And if you do not kneel before me at this time, officer, I will ensure you that my forces will tear you from limb to limb. For I am your king, and you will worship me.
that'll work.
I think that would work.
I'm gonna use that next time I get pulled over too.
How often are you getting pulled up?
I haven't in a long time, so I'll keep that in mind. I'm sure it'll go great.
Yeah. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about video games.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. What have you got going on right now?
At the very moment, we have season 3 of Legend of Vox Machina out on Prime Video now. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, the series is the animated, like high stakes, awesome version of our first D&D campaign on Critical Role. It is adult animation. There's a lot of violence. There's all sorts of language. It's very body, but epic and fun and heartfelt. Got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
No
all
big
3
deal.
seasons so far,
No big
so that
deal.
tells you it's pretty good. You should check it out. And beyond that, a number of great games coming up and things I hope to announce in the near future. Of course, we have our stream show on Critical Role. So yeah, a number of things and just kind of happening all the time.
Just everything's happening so much.
Oh, so much. So much. Horsey Books knows what they're talking about.
Thank you so much again.
Of course, thank you for having me.